Hi, thank you for joining us. Super excited today to talk to a good friend of mine and somebody I regard as one of the experts on narcissism in the UK and in Ireland, and that's Kieran Fitzpatrick. Hi, Kieran. How are you doing
Hi,
today?
James. Good to talk to you. It's great talking to you again.
This is such a interesting area. So many people have asked me about delving into narcissism. And I think today we're only going to manage to scratch the surface, but I'm hoping to perhaps have a series of these because there's so many areas of narcissism. And I think off the bat, one of the things that struck me, a couple of things. Firstly, most people are aware of the word now, and if anything, it's perhaps an overused word. I guess much like trauma, PTSD, and phobia, you kind of hear it a lot on social media. I'm members of different groups on kind of Facebook, etc., and people post stuff. And often what I see is not a true narcissist, but just perhaps a relationship that's not going well. So I think classifying what a narcissist is will be a great area to start. And one of the things that really surprised me is how recent narcissism has come into, if you will, the social consciousness. I know it was first appeared in DSM-4 in the 1950s, but it wasn't something like the 1980s. That's 30 years after DSM appeared, which is the manual of mental illness, mental personality disorders, etc. So it's only since 1980 has appeared as a recognizable personality disorder. So I want to delve into it today, look at the different areas and learn a bit about it, and just help people understand. Because if it's true that 1 in 6, some people say it's 1 in 6 is either a covert or a overt narcissist. Other places say it's 1 in 10. But either way, if you're out there in the world, chances are every day you're meeting a narcissist, be it in the supermarket, be it on the road, be it at work, be it in your relationship. And if we can help anybody, it would be to help them to understand how you can, if you will, shield yourself from the damage a narcissist can do. So Kieran, what are the defining characteristics of narcissism?
All right. So I should have took notes while you were talking there because you covered a whole lot of different
Yeah,
topics
sorry.
and areas, all of which, no, but all of which um, highlight why there's so much you can say about this subject. It's about you were talking about how many of them you come across in your day-to-day life, which, even though it's a small percentage of the population, in a big population, that's a large number of people. So you will come across them. One of their characteristics and traits is that they exude this kind of charm and attractiveness, and they're somebody that people would find very pleasant in a sort of short term or kind of ephemeral interaction. Like if you only met them in the street or you knew them through a friend of a friend, you're generally going to think they're a lovely guy. They'd be quite charming. They could be a very enjoyable company. They could, there's that aspect that we're meeting more of them than we realize, and a lot of the times we meet them on a day-to-day basis and think they're fine. So that kind of disguises the numbers a little bit. We tend to only discover it when we get more involved with them. And then our suspicions are raised. And then a lot of their, a good point you made there is a lot of their characteristics, like most, sometimes I don't like the terms disorder or, especially disorder and dysfunctional, because, you'd know yourself when you delve into the psychology of a person who has one of these disorders or dysfunctional behaviors. There's a very clear function behind the
Yeah.
behaviors, and there's a very solid order behind that as well. So with these people, sometimes those characteristics will only come out when you're in close proximity to them, that they become visible, or if they're squeezed. Like a lot of personality disorders, they can be latent there, they can be wrong. Even the person themselves over a period of life might not exhibit any of these characteristics until they're put under some sort of internal or external pressure, and then they come to the fore. Um, and then you were talking about, defining it or being able to characterize it, or, what's part of the definition. I'll get onto that in a second. You mentioned DSM, and DSM-5 has a definition there. I'd be able to kind of basically read out to you. But because it's become such a popular thing now, and we know these things come in phases, it's like there's a lot of talk about now about PTSD. That was a big thing for
Yeah.
a while, and now CPTSD is very much in vogue. And a lot of people have any and all of these things, but
Yeah.
they tend to come in waves of nearly popularity. And the thing about narcissism, I think, is it's such a catchy word, and
Yeah. Yeah.
people can explain its origins. And I'm not, is it a Greek god? It's one of the gods anyway. It's named after, and this god saw his own reflection in water and fell in love with the reflection. So fell in love with himself. So
Yeah.
that ironically leads to one of the sort of misunderstandings about narcissism, is what they do present with is this grandiosity, this seemingly incredible self-esteem and confidence. Um, they go on about their success. They believe they're special and unique. Now they have a sense of entitlement, so they really seem to exhibit all the characteristics and behavior of someone who's got overinflated self-esteem. And that's the way kind of to approach them and to treat them, because
Yeah.
this is their external self. Unfortunately, and we could delve into all of these different aspects, but what makes it a personality disorder, like a lot of personality disorders, it's like, and I don't mean their split personality, but part of them has split from their true selves to begin to act as a defensive shield.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So the
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
reason the reason they have a core need for a defensive shield is at the root, at the back of it, at their truest self. They don't feel any of the things they're projecting. In fact, they feel the opposite. They feel they've a self sort of they've a self disdain. They've, all the things they exhibit towards other people are projections. We get into that later on. When they start treating people badly, it's a rejection of a self-loathing. That's the word I was looking for. Like, it's extremely strong. You can't. It goes off the scale on the negative end of self-esteem. It's a self-loathing, and that's what causes them to produce this alternative self, if you like, and begin to live
Yeah.
through that, because that keeps them away from feeling the feelings of loathing. And we can all have this. We can all have these negative feelings that we don't want to feel, that we don't want to be aware of. But they're so damaged that their core self to them becomes unbearable. And they can't even be aware of their feelings. And this is why we talk maybe later on how they'd be so hard to treat and how they'd rarely turn up for treatment, because they kind of
Mm.
become this alter ego. Now, you could then slip into a sense of some kind of sympathy for them, and I suppose they are to be sympathized with, because at the end of the day, they will suffer more than, don't know now, but more than the people that encounter them. But their suffering will be persistent and never ending, where there is hope for the people around them to extract themselves from it. But you okay, you can be sympathetic for them or towards them, but if you encounter them or you have to deal with them and some of the things we talk about, you cannot let sympathy influence your actions in any make, shape, or form, which is unfortunate. But
Mm.
getting back to DSM, and I know I'm rambling here, but I have a written down definition
Yeah.
that they use, and there's all kinds of definitions. And as a personality disorder, and they've got I think 9 or 10 different personality disorders defined now, and they've broken them into 3 clusters. But anyway, within that, this personality disorder, they say, comprises a pervasive pattern of grandiosity in fantasy or behavior. So that's them internally and externally. A constant need for admiration. These are the classics. There's a lot of them, but these are among them. A lack of empathy. It's a
Yeah,
real
yeah,
classic. Um, Beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts. So again, in some contexts, they might seem fine. In some situations, their behavior might be fine, but put under a certain pressure, all of these characteristics emerge, as indicated by the presence of at least 5 of the following 9 criteria. So this is handy.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, and the other thing I suppose I was going to say is, because of the popularity of the term, we're very quick to go, he's a narcissist, you know, or he's a
yeah,
bit
yeah.
narcissistic. It's nearly like a medical definition. I sometimes think there's a big difference between somebody who's a bit OCD, and you see,
Yeah, yeah.
OCD was another thing that was very popular for.
Yes, yeah, right. Yeah,
It
yeah, yeah.
seems to have waned a little bit,
It does, doesn't it? I
yeah,
think you're absolutely right. I mean, narcissism is a spectrum disorder, and so therefore we're all. I always think we're all kind of a 1 or 2 on that order, on that spectrum.
speak for yourself.
And well, yeah, maybe a 1 tops. So we're all the center of our own universe. That's absolutely fine, because people, I think, if you ask yourself, "Am I a narcissist?" then chances are you're not, because a
Yeah,
narcissist probably wouldn't ask that question. But being a spectrum, we've all met 10s on that. We've all met 8s and 9s, and I think one of the things you said a moment ago was so interesting, and it kind of triggers something that I remember reading, that in DSM-4 and 5, we talk about disorders, etc. But actually, you're absolutely right. Narcissism, although it's called a disorder, actually, it is the perfect vehicle for those individuals as a defense and protection, for their ego, for the self ego. So in actual fact,
absolutely.
it's almost the opposite of that. You talk about feeling sorry for people. So some of the data I was looking at recently. Firstly, narcissists live longer than most of us, and no one knows why. I delved into the research. Nobody, but the research shows they live longer. Also, narcissists, particularly and indeed covert narcissists, are absolutely brilliant at speed dating and dating. There was research done. I forget which university, where they people diagnosed as narcissists, and they were absolutely the best at dating in these speed dating events. And I guess part of that is a narcissist, and we'll delve into this in a second. He has learned, and I guess at a young age, to be so attuned to what people want, to read the room, if you will. I guess if you ever do network events and you meet a lot of people quickly, and narcissists are next level at doing that. Whereas most of us kind of, I speak for myself on this one, fumble through, but they are so attuned. It's kind of like their superpower.
Yeah.
Kieran, to make it easy, are there any celebrities, anybody that in the media, anybody you'd know, without without wanting to get sued, that you would class as perhaps more of an overt narcissist?
Yeah, there's a lot. But just going back on again, you've said a couple of things there that are interesting. Again, I should be taking notes. You're talking so fast. They,
Sorry, I'll slow it
but
down.
you're right. Yeah, any of these spectrum things. So just sticking with defining them for a moment. I'll go through the 9 criteria the DSM use, and there's
Yeah,
lots.
please.
But as we were saying, because it's now, it used to be OCD, or you're OCD, or
Yeah,
you keep your car very clean, you're OCD, and that's harmless enough. But there's a massive difference between someone who likes to keep their car clean and all these kind of traits that anybody can have, and
yeah,
someone who has actually got an obsessive compulsive disorder. That, and I've dealt with them, I'm sure you have. I'm thinking offhand of the last guy I dealt with, and I would see him pulling up outside for his appointment, always in plenty of time.
of course.
And I would know I would have time to have a cup of tea and a biscuit before he made the front door. He drove a
Okay.
van. He'd sit in the van checking everything. He'd get out. He'd close the door. He'd lock it. he'd walk around all the other doors, he'd check them, check what they were locked. Then he'd go back to the first door, then he'd lock the van, then he'd unlock the van. And anyway, he'd come halfway up the drive, he'd go back out. So I knew I had 5 to 10 minutes for this guy to make the kind of 5 yard walk from his car to my front door. That's somebody with
Well,
OCD.
hopefully at the end of therapy with you, he was out the van, straight in your door, and
Yeah.
no cup of tea or biscuit, which would be
Yeah.
quite sad.
But you see, and the
Yeah.
thing is, the thing is again is that OCD is a symptom. It's a symptom of a deep anxiety, and it's protecting the person, and
Yeah,
it's protecting them from making some sort of mistake or a slip up that they feel would cause them a dramatic thing. So similarly with narcissistic personality disorder, the numbers with that would be relatively small compared to the numbers we'd accuse of being narcissist. And as you said, people
yeah,
are on a scale, and where you were claiming to be a 1 or 2 on it, I remember being at a seminar on narcissism, which wasn't particularly good because I don't remember most of what they said. But what I do remember is myself and a colleague at the first tea break competing as to who was the best narcissist. Because at the end of the first session, anybody in the room could have been labeled a
yeah,
narcissist.
yeah.
So
Yes.
it's a thing to watch out for. But intrinsically, it's a huge part of the person. So the 9 criteria DSM uses: a grandiose sense of self-importance, a preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. Now, some of the little words are really important. Ideal love. There's no such thing. So nobody's going to come up to that for them. I know you had some questions about relationships and what it's like. There's your starting point. Who
Yeah.
is going to match that? The third one is a belief that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people or institutions. So now you begin to see the elevated perception they have of themselves. They have a need for excessive admiration, a sense of entitlement. Now, this becomes one of the most obvious things you see with these people. This completely irrational sense of entitlement that's mind-boggling when you meet it face to face.
Yeah.
Interpersonally exploitative behavior. Now that can verge from very, very subtle, someone that you barely know, to something very serious. Like you talked about the workplace, and that sometimes it can be really bad. A lack of empathy. This is something they can begin to spot quite quickly just by their throwaway remarks, their reactions to things that would ordinarily generate some kind of a sympathetic approach from somebody, or an
Yeah.
empathic approach. Envy of others, or a belief that others are envious of him or her.
Yeah. That's
Begins
interesting.
that begins to emerge as you begin to know them better. Very, and you see what we can get into too is one of the things about a general thing you could say about them in relationships. Every relationship is transactional. Like, what are they getting out of it? Whatever you get from
Yeah.
them, there's a payback. Some of the terminology used about narcissists and relationships is they refer to the person in the relationship with a narcissist as the host. So it's almost like a parasitic thing. The
Yeah.
narcissist has a host, and that from whom they get their narcissistic feed, if you like.
The supply.
Their supply is the word they use.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
when it's been described by psychologists, these are the terms they use. So you begin to get to see what the relationship is like from somebody looking at it objectively from the outside. And the last one is demonstrations of arrogant and haughty behaviors or attitudes. So they're kind of the
I love the word
top.
haughty. It's not.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not the word haughty. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, I
It
used
is a
it.
great word.
I used it recently with that colleague who was competing with me for their narcissism top of the
Oh,
table.
right. Were you more haughty or they more haughty?
No, unfortunately, they out haughtied me on that one. Yeah,
Can you be Irish and haughty? It just seems like an English kind of very haughty.
yeah, it would more likely be. Yeah, yeah. Maybe it's the English are more prone to this narcissism.
Maybe.
Because
So many questions.
we wouldn't have
Yeah,
any of
no,
it over here.
it's not allowed over the
No, we
over the
wouldn't.
channel there. No.
We're too
I
nice.
think
But
you are too nice.
You were asking about personalities a couple of years ago, and
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
coming back in vogue now. Whether he's, whether he's diagnosed or diagnosable, Donald Trump displays so many characters. Whether he is or not, now you get in an argument. Oh, look, you can't do that. But if you want to a sort of comic book example, he'd be a very good example. You
yeah.
know,
Would Donald Trump almost class as a slightly communal because he talks a lot about what he does? So a communal narcissist is somebody who talks a lot, and you see it on social media. I've done a lot of charity work. I've done this work for this. Would Donald Trump also be
yeah, I
communal, or
suppose you see, we've got our. I talked about earlier that there's at least eight main types of narcissist. Now, you could probably say that 80% of the traits and characteristics would apply to all of them, all the
mm,
root characteristics. And then you've got other ones. And as any time you're dealing with people, it's very hard to box them off exactly fit in one of them. And
yeah,
even going back to Freud and his three main personality types 100 years ago, we were all a mix of those. But calculating that mix gave you a good idea of the kind of person you're dealing with or that you are. Um, where I'd say I wouldn't put him, if we did one of these Venn diagrams, I wouldn't make the communal the biggest part of his. You see, now he's um he's a politician. So he's trying to appeal to as many people as
yeah.
possible. So we will talk about the great things he's done. But up to that, he wouldn't have been a
And
well-known,
antagonistic as well.
yeah, and he wouldn't
Uh,
have been a well-known philanthropist,
yeah, yeah,
and probably still wouldn't be one of your big people known for their charity. Now, you may or may not do a lot of charitable things, but a communal narcissist tends to be the kind of person who makes it to the top and represents a charity. The
yeah.
Mother Teresa's of this world. When she was examined more closely, there was a lot more going on behind the scenes that was suited to her personality. Again, I'm not branding her in case of anybody getting
There's,
on this.
there's
And
plenty of books about Mother Teresa out there, so
yeah,
maybe that's a
yeah, but
whole other podcast. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but if we look at things that are acceptable to critique, a lot of these cults and a lot of these, even in the States, particularly where you've got these evangelists and evangelical guys that are multi millionaires, all
Yeah,
based on this whole persona that they're all about what they're doing for other people. But then nearly all of the different types of narcissists will try and project
yeah,
what they do for others and how much they do for others. And to me, the crossover between communal and one of the others would be between communal and covert
yeah.
there, because they're very much about, being humble and, putting everybody else first. And, you know,
On that topic, I think I know we spoke about. I think overt narcissists. We're going to do another podcast just dedicated to overt, and I think they're the most damaging because we've all met. We've all met kind of overt narcissists, and as you say, Donald Trump, and I think Gordon Gekko is the kind of the classic archetype, isn't he, of
mm,
an overt narcissist? Um, but it's there on the surface, whereas with an overt narcissist, you're
covert.
not sure. Sorry, with a covert, sorry,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
not sure. And we're going to tackle that in another podcast. I know when people ask me about narcissism, and you're absolutely right, it's misunderstood, it's overused, and particularly now with the rise of social media. If you read a book like Jonathan Haidt and Coddling of the American Mind, highly recommend it. The increase in narcissism in the universities, etc., and its origins is fascinating.
Mm.
So if somebody asks me off the bat what very quickly how to define a narcissist, I would say the three E's and the three D's: entitlement, exploitation, and empathy, or rather lack of it for the E's. The D's: defensiveness, dismissiveness, and dominance. So if you're with somebody and they're showing those traits, rather than going to the DSM-4 or googling it, that they're
Mm.
very very apparent. And I think the message is you need help, because it's tough to live with that. Um, Kieran, could you relate any stories of working with either the after effects of somebody who's been in a relationship? Because I know in your practice over there in Dublin, you've experienced a lot of that. Somebody who's had experience of because of course narcissists rarely, if ever. I know we spoke about the other day. I've encountered three in 20 years. I think you've encountered a similar number, and
Yeah.
there's reasons why they come for therapy. We won't tackle that now, but the after effects, like the damage done in the wake of a narcissist. Could you talk me through some of your experiences in
Yeah.
therapy
So
with that?
yeah. So again, before I answer that, and I won't forget it, you were talking about was it the E's and the D's? There's four C's that are pretty good in
I
identifying.
could think of one of them.
Yeah, so like, that's five. Right.
Okay. Yeah. What are the C's? That's great. We
So
could do
that'd
the
be
whole alphabet.
yeah. So this is how they often appear, and this is what how people can get drawn in by them, and they can be initially a positive experience.
Yeah.
They can give narcissists the attention they're craving because what they're giving off is a charm, a charisma, confidence, and cleverness.
Yeah.
And this is kind of thing that would, attract followers, we'll say, to a
Yeah.
politician, and that there's many
Are
politicians.
narcissists clever?
In my experience, personally, they tend to be, and I think that
Is
might
that
be, I
because they're
think that might,
so
I think it might be because they, now I'm just talking off the top of my head here now that you mention it, but it may be that, as a, these splits happen when they're very young. Like again, you could be, you could be sympathetic, but you had a question there about the causes of it at once time.
yeah.
How does it happen? And it happens in early childhood, like an awful lot of things we deal with. Any of these disorders and dysfunctions usually develop in early childhood when we're too young.
Can you talk through that now? I'd really love to know more about that.
Yeah. So, um, you'll generally find a common cause to a lot of these things like narcissism, even split, or what do they call it now? What's we call split personality now? There's a nicer term.
Schizophrenia? Oh,
Yeah, schizoid. There's anyway, we'll get back to it. But some of these more extreme, even psychological effects, are just dependent on the intensity of the early childhood experiences. And there's three kind of conditions that lead to this and narcissism. And one would be insecure attachment experiences as a child. And that's big. Again, you could have 10 podcasts on attachment and the four
maybe
basic
we'll.
attachment type. Yeah. The four basic attachment types and how they come about. But an insecure attachment can be the start of a split. A child hasn't got a connection. And then, or also an emotionally unavailable parent or carer or significant adult. So again, they haven't got that emotional connection. Um, or an early life trauma, which can be any of a number of things. It could be an incident, an accident, abuse, neglect. It could be a death in the family. It could be an alcoholic or a drug addict parent. It could be a suicide. Or, you can imagine any of these major traumas. Um,
Hmm,
can be at the roots of it. But whether they're clever, I think it's because this is an adaptive behavior, and maybe a clever, intelligent child, it's the way they're actually processing it in some fashion. And if you think about it, as you said, it's nearly it's one of a number of very apt adaptations to make to
yeah,
survive the trauma that you've had,
yeah.
Um, what
I've
was the
often
question
thought
you asked me
about.
there first?
We could talk for days. I mean, because if we go back to our hunter-gatherer ancestors,
Hmm.
thousands of millions of years ago, were the narcissists more likely to survive? In which case, those genes have been passed on far more than I don't know the answer. I'm
Yeah,
I'm not sure
it's
anybody
well,
knows the answer.
funny.
It's
Yeah,
a
no,
thought
but
experiment.
yeah, what's funny is yeah, one of the things you mentioned there earlier that I had forgotten you said was how the research has shown they live longer. And there was
Mm.
research a few years ago about, all this positive thinking this, but negative thinkers live longer as well. But with it, it's one of these researchers that a lot of these institutes, we have them here that come up with, you know, 5 year studies that tell you that if you stay in school longer, you're more likely to get a good job, this kind of thing. Now, with narcissists, it's quite simple too. They are so self-absorbed and basically selfish that they put themselves first and look after
Yeah,
themselves first, no matter what they project. So they are more likely to live longer because they're
yeah,
top of their priority, and
yeah,
um and this is where it bleeds into being, a narcissist or narcissistic personality disorder as distinct from natural selfishness, which leads to, survival and evolution. So, they could be like and intelligent. That was the other question you asked me, were they intelligent? And the funny thing with narcissists is they would tend to be intelligent because it takes a certain amount of intelligence to maintain this. And when you look into, um, we look more deeply into their behaviors of manipulation, of actually lying. So even basically lying takes a lot of mental energy to maintain the lie, to not make a slip up, to
mm,
remember what you told them, to use the lies to manipulate the people around you. And that's a huge thing with narcissists. So, there's terms like triangulation, where they bring a third party into your direct relationship with them. That's a whole
yeah.
other area.
And of course, gaslighting, another one of those terms that's
Yeah,
appeared in the last 5 years that
exactly. Yeah,
hasn't
yeah.
existed before.
Yeah, and they, one of their big traits is divide and conquer. So they need to know, what do they tell you about me, what to tell me about you, in order to maintain that separation and division. So they are, you would need to be quite intelligent for this to be your disorder, or to be this, for your to be dysfunction, which is very functional.
So could it be that the incredible cognitive load it takes to be a overt narcissist keeps their brain young and they live a long time? Maybe, who knows?
Yeah,
Something
yeah. As I say, I think
maybe
it's I
needs
think
to be
it's
researched
simpler
on.
in that. Yeah, they just look after number one, and that's their key thing. But interestingly, while talking about their intelligence, where under pressure, or if you're dealing with them, or you do challenge them, or you have to defend yourself against one, what you'll find sometimes is that their emotional narcissistic needs begin to supersede their intelligence, and their focus and their drive at an emotional level causes them to start becoming a little bit shoddy on the intelligence,
Yeah,
that they start to drop the ball
yeah,
in,
yeah,
in an amazing way. Someone who is by this stage is perceptibly extremely intelligent and extremely diligent, and their attention to detail and their energy to dot every I and cross every T, suddenly see them like almost recklessly dropping the ball. But this is when they've been squeezed so much that now their emotional characteristics are overriding. And like we know from Coué and right back in the 1700s, when logic and reason is in conflict with emotions and feelings always win. So
yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
then it's their their emotional damage begins to affect them, and they start getting very sloppy, and that leaves them open then to challenge. But again, there's no benefit really in challenging them. We talk maybe at some stage about how to deal with them, but
Yeah, yeah.
challenging them is just poking the bear or putting fuel on the fire.
A common theme that appears in many of the forums online and books on narcissism is stonewalling is the best way, because you say you won't win. Another phrase that springs to mind, a little catchphrase, it's worth remembering. A narcissist's accusation is a confession. In other
Yeah,
words, the very thing a narcissist would accuse you of is the very thing that they have done. And I
yeah,
think the reason we see so many people in therapy, um, is because what they leave in their wake, a narcissist, overt and covert, is so destructive and in many, many ways and for many, many years. And I think when we talk about overt narcissism next time, it'd be interesting to delve into that. Just a quick question. I've got so many kind of backlogged here. When you spoke, firstly, when you spoke about an overt narcissist, you said he. Am I right in thinking, and again, I don't know if there's any research on that, are they going to be more overt male narcissists and less covert? And are females, again, hunter-gatherer, that they have to be more protective and more kind of tribal? More females are more covert narcissist. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, that's a quite I hadn't thought about, but again, thinking off the top of my head, because you can overcomplicate all this with the research and this and that and the other, and it comes down to, simple psychology at the end of it, and also day-to-day common sense type stuff. So I suppose, given the way society has been right up to very recently, and you could argue it hasn't changed that much, as it's an adaptation, a man is more likely to be able to fill the position of an overt narcissist, a malignant narcissist, or one of these, and even basically have the physicality and the masculinity to pull off some of that domineering behavior, that threatening behavior, that wrestling power, that manipulation at that level, where covert narcissism kind of is an easier role for a woman to slip into, especially societal, where they actually, so a narcissist always feels like a victim. You get the most malignant, most masculine, the most toughest, roughest. You'll hear it through them that the root of it is they feel victimized, which is probably true from their childhood, but they're all of their behaviors and actions and feelings are rooted in this sense that they're the victim of this. They're the one suffering. Now, a covert narcissist tends to play that out more openly and publicly, that they're hard done by. They've a bad luck story. They never got a break. They've had a harder life than anybody else. Nothing goes right for them. Everybody else has a great life, but they don't. And I suppose traditionally women would have found themselves more in those actual positions, or it's easy if you go with the idea that our external world tends to mirror what's going on inside, they'll have ended up in those positions. Whereas the reaction for a man, the openings to be in a position like that would be less prevalent, and the option to push your way into the more domineering situations probably more open to
Yeah,
it.
yeah. That's so interesting. Would an overt narcissist have need for flying monkeys? So if you're not familiar with the term flying monkeys, maybe you'd like to kind of
Yeah, it's based on the film The Wizard of Oz, where there was flying monkeys going out doing the
the
bad
wicked
work for
deeds.
the wicked, yeah, for the wicked witch. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that is and it's funny how movie terminology has shifted into this, maybe because it's during the period in America where psychology was becoming more aware of stuff, because gaslighting is a term
From a
from
film, yeah.
from from a play that was turned into a film, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And we get back to that in another time. But flying monkeys then are people recruited by narcissists to work on their behalf, whether that's just simply defending them, or whether it's attacking an antagonist or an opponent, you're either one or the other. You're either a friend or a foe. It's no in between with them. And then it can be something as subtle as spreading rumors about them, to something as obtuse as confronting them. So again, yeah, I mean, overt narcissists would have great use for flying monkeys. They'd be the troops. They save them time and going out and doing the donkey work for them. A covert narcissist, again, because they're much more subtle and less visible, they will be much more subtle and delicate about using flying monkeys when and if they do, and
Yeah,
would
yeah.
be less likely, I suppose, to recruit them, because it's hard to, I wouldn't say less likely, but it'd be a completely different process it would be more based again on sympathy, poor me, and then they'll go off, oh, do you realize what you're doing to your poor mother? You know, the flying monkey will have gotten the sob story from, we'll say, the mother in this instance, and will be sad, and the mother will know. They'll have selected and chosen a bit, you know, and again, that's human nature, you know. Bullies select who they're going to bully, you know.
Yeah.
Muggers select who they're going to mug with this sixth sense that we all have. Um, the quiet person ends up at the back of the queue, the obnoxious person's at the front of the queue,
Yeah.
you know. Um, but so, you know, a narcissist will pick, they'll have flying monkey candidates and they'll recruit them as such. And
Yeah.
again, it'll be different process depending on what they're projecting, you know.
It's funny because I had the pleasure of seeing two talks last year um, locally. One was the psychology of a serial killer, and the other one was the serial killer next door. So along those lines. If you get a chance to see the talks, there were two different ladies giving the talks, both fantastic. But towards the end of the second one I saw, there's research on how you walk and your arm swing determines your likelihood of being mugged. And this is well researched. And actually, one of the things she showed, there were three clips of three ladies walking on the road. Which one is more likely to get mugged or attacked?
Yeah.
And it was interesting. The majority got it wrong. So again, if you're the skill you learn as a narcissist is to read the room really quickly. And perhaps next time we'll talk about sociopathy and that element of it, because there's a lot of confusion around sociopath and narcissist. But I think we'll dig into that a much later time. What I want to talk about is a narcissist, or rather an overt narcissist in a relationship. Because if right now you're watching this and you know something, you have a friend, or you may be experiencing yourself, one of the reasons it's hard to leave a narcissist, covert or indeed overt, is they're the most charming. So your friends may say to you, how lucky you are. You've met the absolute perfect guy, perfect lady. Why would you ever, they're amazing. But of course, what they don't know is they're seeing the other side of that person. They're not seeing the true self, as you say. So one of the reasons it's so damaging, and what we see in clinical work is, again, the damage left in the wake, is they are the hardest people to leave because they're the most charming. If somebody's
Yeah.
experiencing right now, what would you say to them? How can, firstly, what are the common manipulation tactics that are used by a narcissist in a relationship? And what can somebody do?
Yeah. So I'll answer this because I realize I didn't answer your question about what kind of people end up in therapy, having been the victim of narcissists. Maybe we'll come back to that.
Yeah, we'll come back.
But yeah, but this one, so I'm just checking the order here. So narcissistic relationships with a narcissist go through a four-step cycle, usually. Now, when you're trying to get away from one, the charm is worn off. The problem is you've seen the charm is worn off, but people around you that would be saying the kind of things you were saying, they're still falling for it, you know? They're still falling for that charm. You know, street angel, house devil was an old expression for a long time, you
That's a
know?
great one. So
Yeah.
lovely. I've never heard that. Street
Did you not?
angel, house
Oh my
devil.
God,
No,
yeah.
is that an Irish phrase? I love that.
Maybe it is.
Street angel, home
House
devil.
devil.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
House devil. You know,
House
because,
devil.
yeah, because you know yourself, you never know what's going on behind closed doors
Yeah.
in lots of examples. But yeah, that would have been a description here of somebody, oh, he's a street angel and a house devil.
I love
And
that.
you
Okay.
knew
Yeah.
exactly what they meant, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
these street angels are the ones
Or
that,
she, Kieran. It's
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
or they.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Um, no, oh God, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Like I know personally of situations where the mother of the house, you know, destroyed the whole family. Six children. Just well, except for the golden child, and there's a whole other conversation about the scapegoat child, the golden child, the invisible child, all products of a narcissistic parent. But aside, so again, it was a very clear example where there was a golden child who went on to have what you pretty much, if you can use the term, but normal relationships, married at a normal age, one marriage, lifelong, normal kids, very successful career, happy, happy-go-lucky, etc., etc. Five siblings, pretty much the opposite of that, you
Yeah.
know. Anyway, but so a narcissistic relationship tends to go through four phases. From the narcissist side, we look at it, but you can imagine what the experience is on the other side. So it starts with idealize. They idealize this partner. And
Yeah.
again, what that means is they appear to fall head over heels. They love bomb them, which is another
Yeah. Yeah.
expression. We could do a podcast on a kind of a
Just on
glossary.
the fun.
Well, we could, or
We
a
could do. We
glossary of
could do.
terms. Yeah, a glossary of the term. We've already come across flying monkeys, gaslighting, love bombing. And these four are terms that are used. So they idealize. Now, unfortunately, part of that idealization is their selection of the partner. Does that make sense? So you were talking exactly there about how a mugger knows who to mug. And on
Yeah.
that, I teach martial arts and have done for years and years and years. And sometimes you get kids coming in, teenagers will say, and they want to learn it because they're being bullied or they're anxious. And what you notice is the longer they stick with it, the better they get at it, the more proficient they become, the less opportunities there are to use it because they just don't get hassled, they don't get mugged, they
Yeah.
don't get attacked because they're giving off a different air,
The
you
body
know?
language is different. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're funny you were talking about swinging your arms there. I had an experience myself a couple of years ago, and I was in town late at night with a friend, and just because the time of night, whatever, anyway, we were approached and threatened apparently for money or asked for money or whatever. And anyway, they went about their business after abusing us a bit, and uh, I said to the friend, said, "Oh, that was grand. It didn't escalate into anything. They just left." He says, "Yeah, that's because of you." And I said, "Well, sure, I hardly spoke to them." He said, "No, no, it was you. They knew." I said, "They knew what?" I said, "I didn't do anything. I said, I didn't even take my hands out of my pockets." And he said, "That's it." He said, "That was it. You didn't
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
take your hands out of your pockets." And they apparently would pick up on this. I'm not going, "Oh, listen, guys, don't want any hassle." I was kind of thinking, you couldn't be seriously thinking of escalating this, could you?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
across,
It's so
it's right
interesting.
across
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
board, yeah. But on the other end of it, so the kind of people that are attracted to or fall for narcissists fall into pretty much five categories. One is overly empathic people. So they'll feel a sympathy for them, or they'll fall for that sympathy thing, or they'll see beyond them, or they'll see the true self or whatever and feel a bit sorry for them. Rescuers, again, similar reasons. Overly positive people who might just pick up on the apparent positivity and charisma and charm that's going there, or that, oh, look, once we get to know them and once they get to know me, etc. Forgivers, so there's obvious problems there, and children of narcissists. And there's a whole other podcast because they will go into what they call trauma bonding. There's another phrase where,
Whole different podcast.
yeah, yeah, but
Yeah.
it's where your history of abusive relationships is your quote comfort zone.
Yeah.
And again, there's another glossary, but comfort zone is a complete misnomer. It's familiarity zone, because sometimes it
Yeah.
can be really uncomfortable, but what we feel is a certain security in the familiar. So at a subconscious level, if you were the child of a narcissist and you meet one, well, you know where you stand. This is familiar to you. This really perversely, this is what you've learned is what love is all about. So
Yeah.
the first thing is they're going to idealize this partner, this significant other. And I say part of that might be that they've chosen this, but the partner will feel idealized. They'll be love bombed. And again, in hindsight or with knowledge, if you see a disproportionate kind of love bombing going on, it should be a red flag. Ostentatious gifts or holidays or behaviors of any description. You go, hang on, you only know them a week, you know. So that's the first step, is this idealized phase. Once you're in that, and there's a lot more to this, but at a simple level, if they receive back, we'll say, idealization from you, if you're the partner, that triggers their self-loathing, and they begin at a deeper level to go, there's something wrong with this person if they think I'm all that. So they actually begin to devalue the person that they idealize, almost seeing that their love for them is a flaw. And then because they feel so bad about themselves, and they've met someone who would seemingly feel pretty good about themselves, well, that's not going to feel good for them. So now they have to feel better about themselves by making the other person feel worse about themselves, if that's not too convoluted, you know? So this is what begins to happen. They start to devalue. And what devalue means is suddenly the love bombing has stopped and it's starting to go in the other direction. They've less interest in your feelings, your interests, your desires, your opinions get fobbed off, they get ignored. You get belittled, your concerns get either ignored or belittled. And basically, if you wanted to put somebody down, that's what starts happening, but on steroids.
It reminds me of the, sorry, go on, finish.
Yeah, go on.
No, it reminds me of the Skinner experiment with the puppies. I don't know if you're familiar with the experiment. In one study, there were three sets of puppies and three sets of experimenters. In one group, the puppies, when they came up to the experimenters, would be, feed them, kind to them, stroke them, interact with them. The second group would reject them, sort of, go away. And the third group, sometimes they would be the carers, the strokers, the feeders. The other times they'd send them away. And what they found was, what Skinner found was, the third group formed the most attachment to the puppies. So it's that uncertainty, and that's kind of what you're talking about there with narcissists. And in fact, I always think, if you know anybody who's perhaps been in a particular relationship, maybe with somebody's struggling with abuse of any sort, and you wonder why they're staying with them, and then maybe they end the relationship and start a new relationship, and it turns out that new relationship is a similar pathology, if you will.
Yeah.
To anybody who's not experienced that, you think, why are they doing that? But I guess it goes down to kind of Skinner's three puppies experiment. So I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, sorry, I heard a very good example of that. I don't claim I didn't come up with this, but it's a very good example. Is if you compare the relationship to a slot machine. So the people that get in these relationships end up kind of addicted to it, right? Yeah. So if you're playing a slot machine, you could be throwing coins in and getting nothing out, and then you throw a coin in, you get a big jackpot out, and that's exciting, and it's relief and it's release, and it's very, very addictive, and the pattern of an addiction.
Yeah.
Where they were saying a normal relationship, a healthy relationship, should be put $1 in, get $1 out, put $1 in, but that's not addictive. But yet that's what a healthy relationship should be,
Yeah. There's a brilliant book. It's a recent book by Michael Easter called The Scarcity Brain, following on from his previous book, The Comfort Crisis. Highly recommended. And in the beginning, he talks about in Las Vegas, there is a casino they have built off the strip just for researchers. And what they found is, when you put money in the slot machine, say you put $1 in and get 50 cents back, your brain sees that as a win. Even though you've lost 50 cents, your brain and sees it as a win. So obviously the casinos know this, and it's exactly what you're saying. Just that little bit coming back. Fascinating.
And narcissists have an instinctive knowledge of this. There's another term in the glossary called breadcrumbing. So if they can push you to a level where they're now controlling you, remember, you're just their host to provide the narcissistic supply. So they'll keep you at the level that they're comfortable with. So they're just getting enough of whatever it is they need. You're of no relevance to them whatsoever. But what they do then is breadcrumb, which they just give you enough crumbs off the table to keep you within their orbit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
exactly like you described there. But the last two, quickly, I know if we're running from time, we've looked at idealize, devalue, then it's discard. And that's what nowadays they call ghosting or blocking. They you just get dropped, completely
Yeah.
discarded. Now that doesn't necessarily mean you're out, you're free. Because if you're a host and you're a source of their narcissistic supply and you're what's the word I'm looking for? You're a suitable host to them, then what they do is hoovering. And after you can imagine the effects of the devaluing and discarding, but they'll hoover you back in. They'll throw a few more coins out of the slot machine. They'll give you a few more crumbs. And having that addiction, or maybe this pattern from your previous life, you comply with this completely. So you get hoovered again. So
Yeah.
until you break that cycle, or they just decide to finally discard you because they found something or somebody better, that's the cycle. So it's idealize, devalue, discard, and hoover. And even if you listen to that, it's like a torture. And it is
Yeah.
an emotional torture for anyone that gets involved with them.
We all know somebody, or we've experienced that sort of um, living hell. And I think
Mm.
that's one of the reasons I want to do these series of podcasts, just to raise awareness. Fortunately, there's been a lot more in the media. There's a podcast out recently, and it's a young American actor. You'll know him from episodes of Friends, etc. And he's doing a brilliant podcast, and he talks about his narcissistic mother, who kind of forced him into acting. And he's asked, when did he become aware that his mother's a narcissist? And of course, kids, you're not going to know because that's what you're familiar with. Um,
Well, if you do
Kieran,
know, again, you become the scapegoat child. So that's another, like say, you could talk for days and days about this.
yeah. So this is episode 1 of 300 of
Yeah,
Narcissism with James and Kieran. I mean, really, we've skimmed the surface of the overt narcissist
yeah.
today. I think the message I want to leave out there: if you are unsure that you or somebody's in a relationship with a narcissist, the 3 C's, the 3 D's, the 3 E's. Thanks for introducing the 3 C's. I did. Was it 3 or 4 C's?
Or, yeah,
The 4 C's, the
I had to
three
have more than
E's, the
you.
3 D's. You did, yeah. I think there's another C I could add to if you've ever been in a relationship with a narcissist, you might know the other C.
It'd be the first one on
Um,
your list, yeah.
is um, you need help. I don't mean you need help, Kieran. You certainly don't.
No,
But
I don't know about that.
oh yeah, maybe we all do. If you've been in a relationship with a covert or an overt narcissist, there is a lot of support out there. You can reach out to myself at the Hampshire Hypnotherapy and Counseling Centre, to Kieran and your website is Kieran
It's
eh,
dublin-hypnotherapy.com.
Dublin dash or hyphen or dash, is it the same?
Hyphen. Yeah, hyphen's
Hyphen.
the same, yeah.
I know you've got a lot of resources on your website. I'll include links below in this first podcast. Um,
Yeah. So you were saying,
next,
sorry, you
cool.
how you might know, you asked me a question this morning about the long-term effects of being in a relationship like that.
Yeah,
And they're pretty much as you'd expect any normal human to feel, having experienced what we've been talking about. And it can be, you can feel like you're going mad, like you're going insane. Can be very often a loss of identity, wondering about yourself and how you got into this, self-doubt, you know, massive loss of self-esteem. It can have triggered childhood wounds that you didn't know you had till, you were drawn into this. It can lead to depression and anxiety, exhaustion if you've been having to interact with one. And you get things like this when there's often, if there's a business interaction or a business split or a divorce. I know somebody at the moment is trying to arrange a separation from an absolute narcissist. Like he's got all the classics, but she is absolutely washed out, done, finished. And that was what he wanted to do with her, turned her into a wet rag,
yeah,
Um, but you feel that exhaustion or despair,
yeah,
and if you feel that's been brought on by either a parent or your general childhood or somebody you've had a lot of dealings with, chances are you've been unfortunate enough to come across somebody who's either a narcissist or has an awful lot of those characteristics.
And if you're ending a relationship with a narcissist, it will always leave a scar. It will always leave a scar. But like scars can heal, but they'll always be there as a reminder. You don't get over it, but life can get better, I think is the message.
Yeah, and a big part is knowledge. That one of the good things about getting help, having experienced a narcissist in your life, is that knowledge. You talked about the guy doing the podcast. He's now aware that his mother was a narcissist.
Yeah.
I know people that have been like that, and it's only almost by accident. And it gave them such an immediate relief even to realize, because one of the things we didn't get round to the advice for dealing with them, but one of the things is to not take it personally, which is so hard because they usually get to know you. They get to know you. So there's another term in the glossary, baiting, narcissistic baiting. They know you so well. They know what buttons to press to either make you feel devalued or rejected or stupid or insane or whatever. They're so good at it, that one of the things is realizing that they're the ones with the problem. That you don't take what they're saying personally. You need to step back and see that they're the ones with the problem, and there is a process for dealing with them. And that gray stone you mentioned once or twice is the key.
Yeah. But they often choose, as you say, the empaths. So somebody who doesn't have empathy chooses somebody with a lot of empathy. So you're going to take it on board. Again, why we see so many people in therapy who've experienced the damaging, destructive events of being with a narcissist. Kieran, we could talk all day. Next podcast, we're going to handle, I think what's worse is the covert narcissist, because the covert, because covert being sneaky, secret, you're less likely to spot it and less likely for other people to spot it, and so therefore harder to leave. So stay tuned for that one. It's going to be deep. We've got a lot to cover. Kieran, any last words?
Except, well, for people who have suffered at the hands of them, or know somebody who has, or is aware of somebody who is or has, the advice and the sort of emergency help is quite straightforward and simple. We might go into that in the next one. If we cover covert narcissists, it's harder to know that you're involved with one there. But if someone becomes aware of it, then we can give it says short and straightforward advice on how to deal with them and to rescue yourself out of that situation. And also then, that it is possible where you feel all of those, I say, you can feel like you're going insane, you can feel despair, depression, anxiety, hopelessness, but all of that can be resolved if you identify the source of that and begin to untangle yourself from it,
Well, as I say, Kieran's there at Dublin_hyphenhypnotherapy.com. He's got a lot of resources on his website. You can reach out to him there. We're going to look at covert narcissism next time. And just left for me to say, Kieran, thank you so much for your knowledge and expertise on narcissism. A lot of people need your help and support out there, and for doing this podcast today, hugely appreciate it. So thank you so much.
No, absolutely.
And
as you notice, I could talk about this for hours. So.
And I'll see you. Well, yeah, there's plenty. It's such a big area. There's plenty to talk about. And thank you so much for watching. And I will see you on the next podcast.
Great. Look forward to it.